Yeah, who am I kidding? I mean, I didn't hate it, but like, we'll talk about it. Welcome to my Safe Gayven! Hopefully nobody's ears blew out. Maybe they were wearing headphones. But anyway, welcome to my Safe Gayven, guys. Thank you for joining me. We are here. It is another week, which means it is another episode of Loki. This is the penultimate episode, episode 5. This episode is called Journey into Mystery, which is also an Easter egg because that was the first time that you actually saw Thor appear in the comics. It was in Journey into Mystery. So there you go, first Easter egg. But with that said, just like I do every single week, I'm talking full-on spoilers. So if you have not seen episode 5 of Loki, now is your time to dip. But before you dip, if you could do me a favor and hit that like button, and then when you do see episode 5 of Loki, you come back here for the algorithm, leave your comments, hit the like button to get my channel and the video and everything like that out there for YouTube and let my channel continue to grow. But also for those of you that have seen this episode of Loki and you're not dipping, if you still could do me a favor and hit that like button. So yeah, less spoilers, let's jump into it because I gotta go to work tonight, so I gotta hurry up and edit this so I can try to get at least some sleep before I work tonight. So yeah, let's get into it. But this episode continues after where we saw last week's episode where Loki got pruned and he got sent into the void, and now he's trying to figure out a way to escape while he comes into contact with other variants of himself. And I mean, right off the bat, like, this episode was loaded with Easter eggs, and I feel like this is probably the most like comic booky of any MCU property that we've ever seen in the 10 plus years in Marvel. Like, this was hella comic booky, and there were a lot of moments and a lot of elements in this episode that was fun, like getting to see all the different variants of Loki. And so with that, as we saw from the post-credit scene of last week's episode, Loki's been confronted by all the other variants of Loki, and they try to get him up so they can escape because there's this giant cloud monster looking dinosaur thing called Goliath, which I didn't know if that was a comic book reference or not, or something that they made up for the MCU, but I had to look it up, and apparently Goliath was created in 1993, and it's said to be a rival for Kang the Conqueror. So another reference or thing that could allude to possibly Kang showing up in this, which I'm like, if by the end of this, if by next week's episode we don't get a tease to Kang the Conqueror, I'm gonna be highly disappointed in this series. But yeah, they're running from the giant cloud monster, and we get to learn a little bit more about the other variants of Loki and why they became variants. Like Kid Loki, we found out he became a variant because he killed his version of Thor. Classic Loki became a variant because when he went into seclusion, he tried to leave his secluded world, and apparently that caused him to create a Nexus event because he was supposed to be isolated. And boastful Loki, Black Loki, he created a Nexus event, I guess, by killing his version of Iron Man and Thor, and he got all 6 Infinity Stones, which I'm like, take it for the black guy to be able to win. Like, yeah, give it to the black guy. Yeah, I like that. But I guess technically he lost because he's a variant and now he's trapped in this world. But a callback that I did love is the reason that that all the Lokis were able to survive is because at the end of the day, even though, like they said in episode 3 or episode 4, even though Lokis may lose, at the end of the day, they always find a way to survive. And that has been a theme for Loki's really since the beginning of his time in the MCU. And like I said, in this episode, there were just so many Easter eggs. Like, you saw a Thanos copter, which is a reference to when Thanos had his own helicopter, and there was a moment in the comics where he got arrested by the police, and I never actually read it, but I knew about it for a long time, and I'm just like, this is very weird. And we also, there was a moment where you see a Mjolnir in this little void world. You saw like a frog jumping in a jar. That's a reference to Throg, which is an alternate universe version of Thor where a frog gets the hammer of Mjolnir and becomes he's Throg. You saw many different versions of Loki. This time you actually got to see a different version of Tom Hiddleston's Loki, whereas the other Lokis, they were Lokis, but they were played by completely different actors. But this time was the first time you saw Tom Hiddleston playing a different version of Loki, and this time he was the President Loki, which happened in the comics where Loki did run for president, so he had on the comic accurate outfit. And yeah, I need to take this off because this thing is like squeezing my scalp. And yeah, like I said, this episode was filled with a lot of Easter eggs and was very, very comic booky. But with that said, like, I feel like this is the penultimate episode. This is the episode before the season finale. And while I didn't hate this episode, while I did enjoy the ride and got to enjoy learning about the different Lokis and seeing the different Lokis, I ultimately felt like nothing really happened in this episode. And not only did nothing really happen in this episode, yes, you got to learn about the different versions of Loki, but you didn't really get to learn that much about these different versions of Loki. All these different versions of Loki felt kind of inconsequential. And then also consider, again, this is the penultimate episode. We're only one more episode left before this show is done. And I still have a boatload of questions. Like, we still don't really know that much about Sylvie's backstory. And she's a major character. She is pretty much the main character. I feel like Tom Hiddleston's version of Loki's taking a back seat to her version of Loki. And we still don't know a lot about her character. We still don't know what caused her to become a variant, which at this point, I have a feeling it's going to be the fact that she's a female version of Loki. Maybe at one point she was a boy, and then she decided to change she decided to morph into a female version of Loki. And when she did that, that caused her to be a variant, and that caused her Nexus event. Because there's a line in this episode that I'm just like, oh, come on, are you serious? Where Loki asked all the different versions of Loki, have you ever met a female version of us? And they said never, there's never been a female version of a Loki. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, Marvel made this whole big deal about Tom Hiddleston's version of Loki being gender fluid, and then all these different dozens and dozens of versions of Loki, and you mean to tell me not one of them changed their gender presentation from time to time? So you mean to tell me Sylvie is the one female? That's trash to me. So much for representation, huh, Marvel? So much for including a gender fluid version of Loki. Even with the whole bisexual reel, I think I mentioned this, I don't remember if I mentioned this on YouTube or TikTok. I know I talked about it on TikTok, but I don't know if I mentioned it here on YouTube. But Kate Herron, who's the showrunner or head writer of this show, said that Loki being bisexual, they're not going to actually show it, and they're not going to actually go further into it other than what they referenced in episode 3. It was just a one-off line. And it's just then why even bother? If you're going to say Loki's gender fluid and then you're also going to reference that Loki's bisexual without actually going into it, then it's what representation are you really giving us? But how much better would it have been in episode 3 when Loki got drunk and you see him kissing a man and also kissing a woman, and then they had a conversation about it, yeah, I'm pansexual, whatever. As opposed to just, oh yeah, I've had loves with men and women, and then it's never referenced again. And then especially when you get into this whole thing where it's they mention that Loki's bisexual, but yet they're really diving into this idea of him falling in love with technically himself, but a female version of himself. So it's basically just another heteronormative storyline. And yes, I understand you can be bisexual and still fall in love with the opposite sex. That still doesn't make you not bisexual. But how many heterosexual type of stories have we had already in the MCU? So yeah, while they still might be queer, it's still basically the same heteronormative story that we've gotten time and time again in the MCU. So it's again, is this really representation? No, not really. No, not at all. So yeah, I hated that line. No other female this is Loki. In the Norse mythology, Loki turned himself into a horse or a unicorn and had sex with a horse and gave birth to another horse or whatever. All I know is he turned himself to an animal, fucked the animal, and gave birth to another animal or whatever. He gave birth to Fenris, I believe, the wolf that we saw in Thor Ragnarok. That's his child in Norse mythology. And so you mean to tell me this version of Loki can't even be gender fluid? Also in the comics, Hela is his daughter and not his sister, but yeah, that's a whole nother conversation too. But still, representation, right? I guess Pride Month is over, so who cares about representation? But yeah, but in this episode, it turns out Ravonna, she didn't know that the time variants, she didn't know that the timekeepers were actually robots, but even with her finding out the truth, she doesn't really care. I mean, she wants to know who's behind the TVA, but it doesn't seem like she wants to know to try to take them down or you lied to me or whatever. No, she wants to protect whoever the actual creator of the timekeepers and the time variance authority is. And again, knowing what I know, and I know I need to try to put aside my comic book knowledge for the MCU and these shows because Kevin Feige just keeps showing whatever whatever you know from the comics, it's not really what they're doing in the MCU. It can inform some of the stuff that they're doing, but they're really doing their own thing. And I both like that and kind of don't like that, because at the same time, it's like there are a lot of elements that work from the comics that they're not including, like a Mephisto. Mephisto is a character that I would love to see in the MCU, and he works kind of the same way how I feel with Doctor Doom. How Doctor Doom can connect to so many different characters within the MCU. I feel the same way about Mephisto. Mephisto can connect to Thanos, and he has connected to Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet saga. He can connect to Loki. He can connect to Doctor Strange. He's made a deal with Spider-Man. Same way with Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom has had beef with everybody in the Marvel superhero universe. But going back to what I was saying, like Ravonna is Kang the Conqueror's lady. So I would hope, again, by the end of this episode, they get a tease to Kang the Conqueror. I hope we don't have to wait until Ant-Man and Quantumania for us to get our first official reveal for Kang. Like, again, if this show does not end with a tease, even if we don't see Jonathan Majors fully, but if it doesn't end with a tease to Kang the Conqueror, I'm going to be upset. Because jumping to even the end of this episode, again, this is the penultimate episode. There's only one episode left. We didn't even get a post-credit scene in this episode. Like, what the hell? But I mean, that's ultimately all I really want to say. I'm going to save most of my thoughts for when I go live. Speaking of which, I am going live tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Ron. I know it's like we're changing the days every single week. I talked about going live either Wednesday or Friday, and now I'm going live on Thursday, but I have to go with Ron's schedule. He wasn't available tonight, and he's also not available on Friday, so he's available on Thursday. So we're going live Thursday I said Thursday at 8. No, we're going live Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's when we're going to go fully into episode 5 of Loki, and I'm going to get Ron's thoughts in this episode. But yeah, overall, I didn't hate this episode. This episode was definitely not on the level of episode 3, but considering this is, again, the penultimate episode, I was a little disappointed in this episode. Like, had this episode been like maybe episode 3 or whatever, or maybe if this show had more than 6 episodes, I would have enjoyed this episode more. But considering like we only got 1 episode left and I still got a boatload of questions, just like with WandaVision, just like with Falcon and Winter Soldier, I'm finding myself disappointed with these Marvel shows. Like, they have a strong start, but then they just peter off towards the end. It's just like, Kevin Feige, Marvel, what the frick are you doing? I was about to curse, but I don't feel like going in and bleeping it out and editing it in for the so I'm not demonetizing this video. But yeah, like, do better, Marvel. Like, do better. Whatever the next show is, I believe Marvel's What If, but that's animated, so I'm like, I don't really have that much investment in that. But I believe the next show after that is Kamala Khan's Miss Marvel. I hope every single episode of that show is great. And then right after that is Hawkeye, which I'm like, I'm not really looking forward to that. But I still hope every single episode of that is great, because I'm looking forward to at least seeing Kate Bishop. But I would say this episode, I would give it a high breaking even. Also, really quick, it seems like every episode they keep going back and forth. Like, how powerful is Loki? Like, at the end of this episode, you saw old man Loki, classic Loki, use his power of sorcery to recreate Asgard. And both Tom Hiddleston and Sylvie, Loki and Sylvie, both looked at each other like, how is he doing this? And Loki says to Sylvie, oh, I guess we don't know how powerful we both are. And I'm just like, but you're both gods. Like, how do you not know how powerful you, like, in Avengers Endgame, we learn that Thor is 1,500 years old. Yes, Loki is his younger brother, but I'm assuming he's about, let's say Loki is 1,400 years old. You mean to tell me in 1,400 years, he's never experimented with his powers and his sorcery and what he can and can't do? Like, I was just like, that makes absolutely no sense. Especially, like, go back and look, because I did upload it here on YouTube, but I posted a video on TikTok about the difference between comic book Loki and MCU Loki, and how much more powerful comic book Loki is compared to what we've seen in the MCU. Again, I have it here. I guess I'll put the link in the description or whatever. I'll have the link thing show up here. But like, Loki is far more powerful than what we've seen, even in this show. But it seems like every single episode, there's a new level of power that we've never seen before, and then you don't see it in the next episode. Like, even with him using his powers to put the building together, or throwing like energy blasts. We haven't seen Tom Hiddleston's version of Loki do that again, and yet you're like I don't like the power scaling with Loki is just all over the place. But the question is, what did you guys think of episode 5, Journey into Mysteries of Loki? Where does this rank on your favorite episodes of the series so far? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you can, hit that thumbs up and like this video to really help out with the channel. If this is only your first time checking out one of my videos, please check out the other videos on my channel. And if you like what you see, please subscribe for more and hit that bell notification button so you're alerted every single time I post a new video. And tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel, about the live that's happening tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to help me continue to grow. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.